Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Soft Landing Podcast, a gentle space for self-discovery. We're your hosts,
Rafaela
and Eric. This week, we are secure in knowing that our conversation today will be quite illuminating. And to help us do this, we are joined by our guest, Linde. Anna uses she/her pronouns and is a certified sexuality coach and sexological bodyworker in training. She helps to integrate different levels of consciousness through the practice of movement to extend and connect what your body is trying to express when your words just aren't enough. She believes that the use of art can be a power tool for releasing the body from painful society norms and destructive life rules. As a somatic sex coach, Anna brings your body to the center during your healing and discovery process. Welcome to the pod, Anna.
Thank you. It's amazing to be here.
We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
So I do have a Eric's inquiry for this week, and it is around the show called Insecure, because my mind loves a wordplay, and I was like, attachment, insecure, secure, the show. Anna, have you ever watched the show Insecure before?
No,
No,
actually not. So you have to tell me.
Okay, well, it's about this like black woman living in LA, navigating her life, and she is pretty insecure. Like that's kind of the whole premise, is that she doesn't have the most like self-confidence. She finds navigating relationships pretty difficult. She can come off as kind of awkward too and uncomfortable in a lot of ways. And so I was thinking, like, what ways have we seen like different attachment styles show up in the show, and want to see if people kind of picked up on any of those things.
What do you think?
I mean, I definitely think, I'm trying to think what Issa would be. Probably avoidant. Like she definitely, like the moment she gets uncomfortable about something or someone, she's kind of like freaking out and then like disappearing. She's like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't have the capacity to deal with this. So I'm going to, just disappear on you.
Definitely with some anxiety though. So
Oh,
like anxious,
true. Yes.
Avoidant.
Anxious avoidant for sure. Yeah. How about you?
I agree.
Yeah.
It sounds like you got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know in the last episode we were talking about their relationship with Molly. So I would say it's been such a long time since I've seen it, but definitely Molly also avoidant, but in the more dismissive kind of hyper independent realm of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very much like survival. I need to end these relationships to prioritize myself and save myself and care for myself.
Yeah.
Kind of. But then also, actually, now I'm thinking about her dating history and like her intensity, her urgency around finding a long-term partner as well. Like the just going on dates after date after date and seeking validation of her worth and, all this other stuff. And her dating experience speaks to that as well, I think.
Yeah. And how dismissive she can be very quickly when they don't do what she wants them to do. Yeah.
And is she listening to this episode, or do you need to email her and tell her?
Maybe we'll tag Issa Rae in it and be like, hey, let us know if you think these are accurate depictions of your characters.
Of this show that no longer is on.
Yeah. Oh, man. But it is quite the show. But with that, Anna, we would love for you to maybe share a bit about how you got into this work.
Right. So I don't watch so much TV, which is obvious because I didn't see this series. But based in that I have a background as being adopted from Brazil and raised in Sweden, then attachment theory and how we make meaning out of relationships, out of intimate connections, have always been like a topic that's always centered in my life for different reasons. Which gave me or have given me the implications to continue to understand it, but also to understand myself and how adoption is, making relationships complicated for many people.
Yeah, that's like such a simple answer, but so much into it. And so thank you for that. I think when I started to do some research into the topic, one of the first things I came across was the mentioning about either adoptees or, children in foster care, and how, they're impacted from this inability to, develop the attachment. So I really am appreciative to learn more from you about that as well on the topic. So with that, we'd love to do some ground setting. So we keep talking about this thing called attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? What is attachment theory?
It's a theory or a way to describe how we make meaning out of our relationships as children or when we start our life. And it's there for a reason, to make sure that we survive, basically. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm close to the person who gives me food and to keep me protected and shelters me, then I will survive. So the way that I have a connection and have a relationship with that person or that caregiver becomes pattern or an inner working model in my brain or in children's brain and bodies, so that we continue to map relationships like that so that we will continue to survive and get what we need. But of course, it's not all of those relationships or all of those, every caregiver that have the capacity to give us everything that we need.
Yeah.
But those inner working models will feel normal for us. And it will feel like this is the way we should do it. And this is how I make relationships, even though if, it might not be the best way for me as an adult.
That piece of like the survival piece, right? Like we're with attachment, this understanding that we are, developing these relationships to be able to get provided for, right? To be able to, brings us back to the first episode, to be seen, right? Like our first instincts to be able to like be seen and cared for. And that to me, I think is such a powerful thing of how you said, right? Like that initial like development then also replicates for all of our relationships after that.
Yeah, it's about the dependability, right? So as Anna was mentioning about the frequency or the likelihood or how reasonable it is, but what we know for folks who kind of lean more on the secure side, it's not that with 100% certainty every single time their parent is going to be available, but it's most of the time, right? Knowing that things do come up and prevent connection sometimes or prevent a parent from showing up for whatever reason, but most of the time they are present and available. And even in those times when they're not, they're still able to communicate about why and to do any repair work needed around that, versus the crying and the needing and the unmet needs not being heard, not being addressed, being told like, well, just too bad, get over it, or worse, you're not worth it, these type of things that people can really struggle with. So I'm just adding that because, it can feel like a tall ask or a dream to think that someone can be secure, that someone can always be available, but that's not real life and that's not the expectation. But it's just more often than not, how are we intentionally creating relationships where we can say, you can depend on me. Yeah. And if there is a mess up or a rupture, I'm committed to trying to repair that with you. Especially as a child.
You're good enough. We're good enough as parents, because when everything come together, we're good enough. And we know when we make mistakes and we repair it, like you're saying. But if we look at it from an adoptee point of view, then that is not even possible to repair anything, because the first thing that is happening is that we lose our birth mother or we lose that caregiver, and we don't even, majority of us doesn't even have the opportunity to reconnect or to say goodbye or to even understand that this separation is going to happen. So when we look at attachment theory, like we're saying, like good enough, then yes, good enough is good enough, and that's perfect, or that's awesome, because we learn a lot about for ourselves as well, that it's okay to be good enough. We don't have to be perfect. But when it comes to making meaning from that type of trauma or that type of separation or loss, that happens when we are so small, or kind of small the first years in the adoptee's life, then it's really hard to make meaning out of that experience.
So we've touched on a few when we answered your inquiry around attachment styles, but Anna, can you just kind of go through with naming the different attachment responses or styles for the listeners?
I think I can. But secure, we already talked about secure, being good enough, and, keep on being there, no matter if you are a biological parent, a caregiver, or what kind of adult you are in that child's life, which is also the same when it comes to adult relationships, that a secure attachment between adults means that you are there, you keep showing up, or there is a bond that is not so easy to break. And then, like the person you were talking about, what was her name in this movie or this series? What was her name?
Issa or Molly, whichever one.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have the avoidance style, which is like you were describing it, that she comes into a challenge, or she comes into a relationship or a situation, and she has the tendency to avoid or to back out and to run in the other direction, which is also one of the styles, the avoidant one. And then we have the anxious one, which you can say, it's a tricky one because everything is scary, or it's the opposite of safe. So it's very hard to navigate what's a good decision, or what a good partner or a good situation could actually feel like, because the majority of their experience is that it's actually not safe. And the fourth style is the disorganized one, which you can say is a mix of the anxious and the avoidant one. And people with a disorganized attachment style can be hard to understand for people around them, because some of their behavior can be really avoidant, and in the other side they can be very anxious, and there is not necessarily so easy to figure out how do you actually support one of these people in this situation or with this style. Or you tell them one thing one day, and the next day you tell them something similar, and you get a totally different reaction. And for people who are disorganized in their attachment style, this is also usually how they feel. Like, it doesn't really make sense for them either. They just go in between these two patterns, or these two type of behaviors or behavior patterns.
Thank you. Something I'd want to add is, these attachment styles are not one and done. It doesn't mean that you will always be avoidant, you will always be insecure. And even folks who have been deemed as secure can have moments of insecurity, of avoidance, of disorganized, even based on the circumstances on the relationship. And so please don't think you're a lost cause. Because I think when we use this type of language, like, oh, this is your style, it seems like it's an implanted identity. And I think in our society, we love labels, so we can hold on to it like, I'm avoidant, so this is why. No, it does not give you permission to treat people poorly, right? And so just knowing that with each relationship, it's a potential opportunity to expand and grow and to feel more stable and secure in our relationships with other folks. And we have to be accountable to that. Like, yes, I know that I tend to be really anxious, but what do I need in this moment in terms from myself and to the person, and to communicate so I can feel a little bit more clear and secure? It is possible and attainable for all of us, even in brief moments.
Yeah, and that's why I specialize in adoptees. Because the main feeling that we get from our upbringing is that it's something wrong with us. We don't talk about the context, or we don't talk about, our upbringing or the society or whatever else. But the majority of research and therapists have for many years been telling our group that it's something wrong with us. It's in us, this problem is, and that's how it is because you're adopted. which is a very disappointing narrative in so many ways, because it's exactly like you're saying. We can have one type of attachment style to one person, but we always have the possibility to create something else and another style, another type of attachment and quality in relationship with others, with different type of levels of support depending on which age. But exactly like you're saying, even if I have a secure attachment style, so if I date somebody that are insecure or anxious or disorganized or whatever name we want to use, then I would probably end up closer to that side as well, because I need to answer to these behaviors or to these conversations, which can make me feel insecure or anxious as well.
Absolutely. And this is like, we have to be intentional about recognizing these patterns. I know myself, I've been doing this work for a long time as a professional, but also as a client, just recognizing my lived experience and how it's impacted my attachment.
Yeah.
And to this day, I have to slow myself down and say, okay, Rafaela, what do you want? Do you want connection? Do you want chaos? Do you want to be seen, understood? And is the way that you're behaving, is it going to help that person feel seen, understood? Because they probably want connection too. So I can be very dismissive of people and very much like, I don't need anybody. I got myself. I'm independent. Screw this. Don't ever put 2 feet in, this type of mentality. And so I'm always just being really mindful of that part of me, that wounded part that wants to drive the car. Sometimes I'm like, all right, little baby, like, I got you. This person is not terrible. Let me just get you secure in the back seat, and I'm gonna drive. Okay. So I think it is just valuable to add that, because I think in this mental health world, and we talk about healing, we want to be fixed, we never want to be triggered again. We don't, it's like we want to learn these skills to use them and heal ourselves, not really understanding that this is a lifelong practice, right? We don't learn deep breathing just for that moment. It's like we should incorporate this as a daily practice several times a day, because it feels good to our body and it's good for our body, right? I want to slow down to understand these patterns so I can be intentional throughout my life, not just, once I recognize my abandonment issues in this, are we good? Like, no. Likely, no. That is not going to be it. But doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. And so you mentioning that, I think, Anna, is just really, it is heartbreaking, though, to know how the framing or the narrative is created that adoptees are the problem, or, because this happened, it's like a lost cause. That's not hopeful at all, And I'm not an adoptee, but I definitely have the experience of being raised by different caregivers, right? And so I've had to do my own work around feelings and beliefs of abandonment. And was I not good enough to stay with this person, and, all this other stuff. And you do have to work through that. Like, well, if I was good enough, then I wouldn't have had to leave, or they would have taken care of me. Or so what do I need to do to be good enough to stay, so I don't bounce around all over the place, type of thing.
Yeah. It's another layer when it comes to adoption, because the majority of us doesn't know our caregivers. We cannot guess what the reason is, or how they look like, or how old they were. Like, there's so much information missing that when we don't even have that type of details to mirror ourselves in, or to create an idea or a scenario of what has happened, then it's even more easy to go back to yourself, especially younger people, or teenagers, children, younger people, and think, well, it has to be me then. Like, it has to be something wrong with me. And similar to how we are talking about children that have parents that are getting divorced, that they easily blame themselves for being too complicated or too, annoying or whatever. But it's exactly like you're saying. It's not like we can read a book about this and we got it. Like, well, I'm good. I will never make this mistake again. I will never be triggered, because we will be triggered all the time through life. And, every situation can be triggering until we understand not only what you want, like you said, but also what do I need in this situation to be able to change my behavior, or to, make sure my life is going in a slightly different direction that it might have been earlier. And of course, when it comes to sexual connection and intimate relationship, that's also arenas and situations when all of this, anxiety and worrying and fear of rejection and abandonment, it all plays out in our sexual meetings as well. Which is why I want to talk more about the sexual and reproductive health for adoptees, because we don't usually talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to add that usually when folks are discussing attachment and trauma and sex, it's usually about sexual trauma, sexual assault, things like that, and not looking at other forms of relational trauma and how that can also impact our romantic and sexual relationships.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how does the attachment wound of being an adoptee and the trauma behind that affect our romantic and sexual relationships and experiences? I know that's a really broad question, but what's coming up for you?
Yeah.
I guess at the top that you would like to talk about first.
Yeah, it's the best question ever, because like we were saying earlier in this conversation, the idea of I'm not worthy to be loved, or it's not possible to choose me, or I'm not somebody that you can love, or I'm not even anyone that somebody keeps. This type of ideas can start to live their own life in our idea about ourselves as we grow up, because it's really hard to come with the contradiction of this when you have that type of destiny or start of life as many adoptees have. And to learn techniques how to handle those through life is a struggle, which by itself can affect the people you are choosing to date, or the people you think is available for you to date, or if you actually don't date at all. But it could also be like, for me, I'm raised with white parents in Sweden, and somebody asked me a couple of months ago why I only date white guys, and I was like, oh, right, like that's a good question, actually. And while I was thinking about the answer, which for me is about me being raised in a white family, in a white society, where white is how I have been thinking is the norm, or is what is normal for me, how I was raised. That person went to an idea of me wanting to date a white person because they are having a different status in the society. And these type of like conclusions or ideas is very far from each other. But if I'm growing up with, like this example I gave now from my personal perspective, and that is the type of attitude or answers I get, or comments, then I'm not sure how I can handle that in a good way with respect for me as a person when I'm younger. Now I'm 37, I can have a conversation about it, and I can think about it, and it's an interesting question that connects with somatic mirroring. Like, what do you actually think is normal? What do you see as normal? What do you relate to or not? But adoptees in general, we have like a million of these small details and side stories and stereotypes that are like bouncing in and out, which also affects how easy or smooth it feels to date somebody, or to date somebody different than from what you think is normal.
Yeah. Or the community, I think something else that sounds prevalent is the judgment about you from this person, of just like, oh, you don't think maybe other races or ethnicities are good enough, so that's why you date a white person, when you're also thinking about, I'm not too up on the demographics of Sweden, but I can imagine. So it's just like, okay, right. How many Black and people of color were in your direct community, especially thinking about that in the 80s when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Right? In that time. So yeah, I think that it doesn't feel good. It's not fair to make these judgments or assumptions about who you are as a person, and your politics even, you know, and how those things are influenced by where you live and being adopted from being from another culture, country, and race, and being thrust into another.
Yeah, and I think, now as adults, like we're saying, this is important conversation where we can learn a lot about, our own ideas or the situation or the context and so on. But growing up like this and constantly getting comments about who we are dating or not dating, or maybe the people we are dating are getting slurs or comments about them dating us because we are different, it creates a lot of inner conflicts because my social identity is Swedish and only Swedish in that point when I'm looking back. And to get that questioned all the time, every day, some in periods of life or in certain schools or whatever, then that makes me question who I am and what I have the right to feel or to think or to choose, um, which can create kind of a strong imposter syndrome in a lot of situations. And that, of course, also affects my self-confidence or, the self-confidence of adoptees, both when it comes to dating, to relationships, but also in intimate and sexual connections.
Yeah. I wanted to ask if it feels good to answer, but when we're talking about sex and sex education and cultural norms, I'm curious to know about how, or if you had space to talk about these things with your parents around dating and race and being adopted. Like, was that part? I know because sex education is already not happening, probably. I don't know about Sweden. But to talk about the comments that you're getting and people questioning you, or I don't know, just as a kid and just people wanting to know, why do your parents look like that? Or why don't you look like them? And then dating and how that all comes together.
No, it wasn't possible for me to talk about that at all with my parents. We still have problems addressing those type of topics because the narrative in Sweden in general, it has been a long way back, is that Sweden is a colorblind, anti-racist society. Which, of course, everybody who's not white realizes that that's not really how it is for us in that type of narrative or environment or situations. So the majority of time when I got comments or when I got ditched because, people don't actually want to date somebody that is Black because that's not what they want to do, or whatever else that happens, then my parents actually didn't see it because it wasn't in their world image at all that these things could happen. It's like when I'm out with my father, who is, let's see, I'm 37, he is 40 years older than me. So when I'm out with him and my children, who are 13 and 11, people think that it's our kids. So they look at me with disgust for accepting this type of agreement or transaction or whatever it is. And they look at me like I am disgusting for, I don't know what they are thinking really. And that's annoying from one side. It annoys the shit out of me that my kids need to hear this type of comments from time to time. But it also connects me with how sad it is that there is no boundaries here. I'm unprotected, even from being out eating dinner with my father or having a walk in our summer house, talking and laughing about things because we enjoy spending time together, and people, look at us, they say hi to him, and they look with disgust on me. And he doesn't see it. He never really sees it, and I see it every time because I need to protect myself. Yeah, I feel it and I see it because they don't really want to hide it. They want me to see it. And those type of things and situations, I think it's really hard for others to understand how painful it is because that's my dad. He's been in my life since I was 6 weeks old. I have a lot of respect and a lot of love and a lot of trust for him as a person. And it gets, colored or with disgust and shame. Shouldn't even be there.
Wow.
I really just appreciate everything you're sharing, and I think for me that piece with you're talking with adoptees is like this just essential premise, the right of all of these different narratives that you have to deal with, while also like still trying to form those attachments, and how it seems like at every turn there's something right on the external piece that is really impacting and preventing for that attachment to fully occur, or to occur in that more secure way. And really, I am just truly, my head is kind of spinning right now as you're sharing, because it just speaks to this idea, right, of Goguen Gist, that what you're saying, that a lot of the research is saying that there's something wrong with y'all. It's like, no, there's something wrong with the world around y'all, right, that is creating this atmosphere to lead to the issues that adoptees are experiencing.
Yeah, because everything has two sides or three sides. There's a lot of complexity in this. And for me, I would really like for us to change the narrative in general, because of course my early separation is affecting me in one or two or three ways. But like Rafaela is saying, it is possible to heal them. It is possible to change. It is possible to do the work so that I can, become the best version of myself based in my capacity. But all of these other microaggressions and stereotypes and things that are constantly invading me as a person or as a child, as a teenager, I'm so unprotected for a lot of them, which is constantly, creating ruptures in another, maybe, smoother process. And like this example with my father, when I cannot share this with him because I cannot, I keep on trying when it's happening, and he's not there. He cannot see that this actually is happening. He really doesn't get it. Then that leaves me alone in dealing with that experience again and again and again. And then we can talk about attachment. What does that do? That I'm alone again in dealing with something that I would love to have a connection in or an understanding in. So exactly like you said, Eric, it's a lot of things that are making it slide in developing or understanding attachment in adoptees.
Yeah, I think that's really important to name, having that disrupted or ruptured, attachment from birth, from the birth parent. And then again, within the dynamics of being an adoptee, knowing that, oh gosh, like I know people who are adopted, and I just know so many stories of like the secrets and the denial and no, you are a child, this, which is not the same for your case, but just like that gaslighting kind of, in a sense. I'm like, no, I know that there's something happening, but you're telling me that all is well, and it's not. And the loneliness that brews from it. But again, the detachment that can grow from that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. I do want to get a break.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So let's go to a break, and we'll be back in a moment.
All right.
So thank you again so much for being here and tuning in. We just really had an eye-opening, somewhat heavy, and real conversation about what it means to be adopted transracially, transculturally, and how that can impact the familial relationship, but also your romantic and sexual experiences as a young adult and adult. So we wanted to bring it back in to start talking about what does healing look like when you are starting to work through these traumas and attachment concerns. You can share however you would like. I know you speak a lot about your personal experience, but maybe you also want to tie in your clinical perspective.
Yeah. I think healing, because we are navigating so many different type of narratives. It's like, we have the attachment here, we have our parents or our caregivers, and we have this and we have that, and we have the society. But healing, from my perspective, needs to come from me and my authentic self, because it's inside me where the answers, well, they are there. I just don't see them because I don't know where to look, or I haven't had the time and the support to actually figure out who I am and where I'm going and what is important for me, because there's a lot of discomfort in actually not moving or running from what you're scared of, or trying to catch something, so you're performing your way through something. But to be able to sit with the pain or the grief or the disorganization or the lostness of whatever experience it is, I think we need to start there to be able to figure out what we actually need to feel whole or to heal. And it's an ongoing process that needs to start with that type of awareness, when we're not trying to do all the time, to not actually feel.
So in your work as a dance movement practitioner and somatic worker, how do you incorporate those approaches into this work, and maybe even somatic sexological work into this process of healing? What does that look like?
That's a great question. Because sex and dance is very similar to each other if we think about it. It's a language that comes from the body, that we can do in different type of rhythms. We can do it with ourselves or with others. We can, we need to be conscious and aware in our bodies, and we actually need to move. And hopefully we move in the way that we feel comfortable, and in a way that feels authentic and real for us, whatever emotions or whatever state we are in that moment. So healing, when it comes to what I do professionally, is about sharing how we can know that we're actually grounded and safe in our bodies. Because it's very easy to say that I feel safe, or I'm okay, or it's fine, or no, it didn't mean anything. But if we don't reconnect back with figuring out how does it actually feel in your body when you're safe, and where in your body do you feel it, then we cannot go to the opposite and ask ourselves, how do you know that you're not safe? How does it feel when you are scared? How do you know that you're stepping out over your boundaries? What does your gut feeling tells you? And it's very important to actually understand where we feel that in the body, and to do that in a space where they can have the support from me and my nerve system, because I'm safe and grounded when we meet. Then we can mirror each other and we can talk about it. so that they can get an actual experience of how it is to be regulated or co-regulate with another body in that mirroring. And it's a very different experience from only talking about healing or from reading a book or from, because we don't necessarily put it in our bodies.
I love the embodiment work. So I have a somewhat big question. Maybe not big, but tricky.
Okay.
Because I work with a lot of traumatized folks. And sometimes people are very detached from their bodies. You'll ask them, where do you notice that, feel that? How do you experience it? And they're like, I don't know. Because their safety, their survival has been rooted in not feeling and not being aware of what's happening. So how do you work with those folks who are really trying to become embodied, who want to do somatic work in addition to their talk therapy work, but they are struggling with identifying where anything lives in their body? How do you...
And yes, I do have those clients. And first of all, I just want to say it's so painful for them in this situation, like you're saying, because the body is more like a prison and it's actually a container of pleasure or happiness or even pain or confusion. Because if you can address it, then we can release it and transform it. But if we cannot address it and put a finger on where it is in the body, then it's like being buried in your body or buried alive. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for those persons or individuals that are listening, that's extremely painful. And usually I start with choosing a sense that we reconnect with. So it could be drawing or writing, for example, which is movement, but it could also be different movement quality, different strength. It could be moving your feet, for example, on the floor and pressing your toes in the floor and starting to get an awareness of which part of you you're actually feeling in your different senses. And when we connect all of them or all of them that is available or possible to do in that time or in that setting, we talk about it again. That what do you feel and where do you feel it? Or what do you smell? Or what do you see? Or if you close your eyes, what happens in the room? But it can also be a lot about the position they are having in that session or in that room. If they are actually sitting with their back towards a wall so that they can rely on that nobody's going to come up behind me. Or if they are sitting, in the middle of a room, or if I am sitting on their side, or like it's so much about understanding what safety means in that setting for us to be able to create or to create a balance that makes it even possible to enter a more higher somatic awareness or a higher state of somatic awareness. So it's very up to that individual and to that professional in that situation to create the best possible outcome or the best possible situation to even start to elaborate with what is safety for this person right now.
Yeah. It's taking it slow, having self-compassion,
yes.
Not, know, being critical. Why can't I? Because people do, I think now, especially with everything on TikTok and social media, it can just feel a little disheartening or like something is wrong with that person because, everyone else is doing it and I'm struggling to identify where I notice in my gut, my doubt or my nervousness or my pain. So, for anyone listening who has that experience, know that you have been detached for good reason to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the skill or the tool you needed at that time or in that place and in that period of your life. And now as we are securing and seeking and creating more safety, that may not be a tool that you need all the time right now. I'm not even of the voice of saying get rid of it, right? I never want to get rid of any parts or any tools or resources because we might need that at another time. We might need to not feel, and that's okay. So giving yourself some grace for sure, and knowing that it is a practice because you've been in good practice with being detached and not feeling, and now it's just time to learn and develop a new skill. That's how I see it, at least.
Yes.
I really appreciate that, Raphael, because it makes me think back to like the attachment of it all, right? Like even those insecure attachments are ways of coping with that present experience, right? Finding those ways to still be able to be in relationship with that person, to still be, cared for, to still survive, to still navigate the world as it is in that moment. And so how do we support people who have had to rely on that way of being, who are now wanting to figure out a different way to do it? Yeah.
So, we've, I think in talking about the container of the body and creating this experience of safety or safer space, what role does creating a good support system and a safe space play in healing these wounds or trying to repair some of the attachment concerns?
I would say a lot. Because just for example, if I have a very strong inner critic, like we have been mentioning under this conversation, having a person or a family member or a partner or a friend, when I mess something up, something, whatever, like not something important, and I immediately start to repeat what my inner critic is saying because I feel overwhelmed by the shame or the guilt of being late or whatever it is. But to have a friend that can give me the set of empathy or love or self-compassion that I'm actually not having in this specific situation is a very important way to balance my own inner critic. And even if I know that I should do it, it could be totally impossible for me to do it exactly then in that moment. So that's one example on how the support system can be very supportive, even not doing especially complicated or difficult things. But another thing that I think is very important, also doesn't matter if you are a friend or a partner or a parent or whoever you are, but we're not really awesome in remembering the need for time. Time to breathe, time to figure out if it's a yes or a no to this question, time to just sit with myself and ask myself, is this actually right for me or not? And because we're used to being fast and doing things and doing and everything. We're so fast, but the need for time and just let that person breathe. No judgment, no answering, no I need to answer for her or whatever it is, but just
that's someone else's attachment stuff coming up, right? Like I need an answer right now. And why, I think about that a lot though, because we kind of grow up in this society where it's like, if you're trying to find it, you're trying to make up an answer or, just spit it out. But if, and I literally was having this talk to myself today. Well, like I said, because I intentionally have to work on this. And, because I have to be so intentional, it does take me time because usually my first response is I'm leaving or you need to leave. right? I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But I know that's that younger part of me, that fearful part that's trying to protect me. So I do have to slow down and think about, how do I want to word this thing? I don't want to criticize you. I don't want to blame you. I need to own my emotions. I need to say exactly what it is. And all of that takes a lot of fucking time for me to sort out in my brain. And I'm not trying to, get out of anything, because I've been accused of this. Like, oh, you're just say it. I'm like, I want to say it with love and care in a way that brings us closer and connect. I do not want to say the first thing out of my mouth, because the first thing is probably going to be very critical and blamey, and that's not going to help us. So also being able to hold that space with another partner, to say, okay, I'm not going to then personalize my person, my friend, my partner needing time and space. I'm not going to make it about me. I'm not going to run with the narrative in my head, which is they're trying to deceive me. They're trying to swiggle out of it. They're trying to come up with a lie. No, we're all trying to do a little better here and meet each other with love. So we owe that to ourselves and to the people that we're in relationship with, for sure.
I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Sorry, continue.
Go.
Because it's interesting if I decide to try that one day, like, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. No time today I will do it. I will take a deep breath. I will count to 3 every time I'm waiting for an answer. But when we are doing that, everybody who tries it, and I think everybody should try it, ask yourself what is happening in me when I'm choosing to take a deep breath. Like, what is happening? Do I feel anxious? Where do I feel triggered? What kind of emotions is coming up in me? Because it's obviously not about that person or that child. Wow, I got so annoyed when my kids were younger and I asked them questions and they were just staring at me. And in the beginning I was like, how do you not know? Like, you did this on purpose. And then after, and then it's like, shit. Of course he needs to think about it, because he realized how upset I am. So he's trying to figure out how to not make me more upset. Of course that takes time. And that's not even the answer I want.
And they don't have a concept of they're kids. A lot of stuff they're coming into first contact with, and something we've been in contact with for 30 something years. It's like, what do you mean you don't know? You're like, oh yeah, right. You've probably just seen this 3 times in your whole life. You don't know. But it is important to recognize what is happening within me. I think we love this statement of asking ourselves, what narrative am I telling? Or what storyline am I in right now? And what conclusions am I jumping to? When I'm working with couples, I always give this analogy of, like, you are creating a story with someone, but right now you're not letting them write anything. You are just writing the entire book. Check in with your co-author. See what they have to say and contribute about their own behavior, right? You can't write their lines for them as much as we want to.
Right.
And tell them, you don't miss a line. This is the line I want you to follow. But yeah, were you going to say something, Harry?
No, I think for me too, with what y'all both were saying about this, like, time piece too, right, is that when we're thinking about these good support systems and creating these safer spaces for people who are trying to, heal from this type of trauma, it took years to develop it, right? It took years to have these experiences that have led to this attachment trauma. So it's going to take time to heal it as well, right? And so I think, how do we come from a place of, like, love and support and recognizing that we have to not only give time for these people who are trying to heal, but also help them by modeling a different way to build attachment, right? How do we be that good support system that is showing them this is what these relationships could look like, could feel like for you, so that you can start to replace, right, some of those previous experiences with more affirming ones.
Yeah. And that's why I like to remind people about the practice, because I think people can kind of get in their head, like, I'm 35. So it's going to take another 35 years. First of all, maybe. Right. But doesn't mean it's going to be a miserable, painful 35 years, right? It's going to be growth and growing and a lot of insight. But that's why I like to also just change the language to practice. So we've been in practice of doing things in a way that have kept us alive. And now we're trying to be in practice of doing something else. And it's going to take time. because we've gotten really good. We are experts in avoidance. We're experts in the blame game, right? We're experts in these things that are not really serving our current relationship. So how do we remind ourselves that we have to just practice the thing consistently so we can then be experts in non-conflict based communication or whatever the new skill is.
Yeah. And just one other idea that you could, if you want to like, send something encouraging to people, is that usually a good sign on that you're doing something that you're not used to doing is that you're outside your comfort zone. So it means if you're always inside your comfort zone, then probably things will not change, because you're probably in the same pattern. You do the same thing, you talk the same, you eat the same, and so on and so on. But if you can, inside your comfort zone, decide to change a small detail or answer differently to that person, or do things differently, or whatever it is that is different for you, then this is also a way that is possible to do in the life you're already living without too much effort. It's just the effort to realize how hard it is to do something different that you need to deal with. But it doesn't mean that you need to, do a big change or quit your job or get a divorce. Like it's not at all those things that you should do. You should do the small things that you think you can actually, go through with, that is possible for you to do, so that you know how it feels to do it differently.
That's when you can kind of tell if someone is like that urgent need to change and fix, and making these really impulsive, rash decisions. Like, I'm quitting my job, I'm ending my relationships, I'm going to move to, this faraway place and start over. Which can be like, okay, is that avoidant? Is that anxious? Like, what's going on? Right?
I'm like, oh shit.
I know, I've been there too. Don't worry. As many times I go abroad for long periods of time. Out of here. But just being able to recognize those patterns within ourselves and knowing that small changes consistently daily is what gets us to make those major shifts. It's not those immediate big changes, because when they don't go well, they are usually a lot more disruptive, and they have bigger impact because it's such a big thing. Like, imagine you sell everything and then move across to the other side of the country, and then you hate it or whatever. It's like, now what do you do? Right? Versus like, okay, I'm going to do something on the smaller scale that's likely going to have a big impact, but if it doesn't work, it's not going to ruin my life or something like that. So we have to be a little strategic here. In our healing process.
For sure.
Yeah. And it could be just telling no to my colleague that I want to eat lunch alone today because I actually need the quiet time because I didn't sleep well. Instead of going with, yes, okay, I'm coming because I think my colleague really appreciates it, because who is going to sit with her if I'm not, and so on and so on. So, I mean, it could be those small things as well that just, practice some self-care instead of giving to others when you actually need to be with you.
Yeah, I think the self-care piece can be another way to help people get back into a relationship with their body of awareness. So when I have folks who usually like, I don't sense anything, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, let's start with just when your body tells you have to go to the bathroom, are you going? Are you sitting there bouncing your knee because you feel like it's rude or unprofessional, or it's just inconvenient to go to the bathroom right now? Or if you're cold, how long does it take you to get a jacket or put on socks? Right? If you're hungry,
how much water do you drink every day?
So are you listening to these body cues, and being able to start there can be really helpful, and then working into the more emotional piece as well. So there's a lot of places to start. Everyone is unique and at different levels and experiences and relationships to and with their body. But our bodies are here for us to be here with us, for us to be here with it. And we owe it that time and patience to ourselves and to our bodies to figure it out. Like that primary relationship. I think, we always say the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one
with yourself.
But really, but really it is. So how can we get in right relationship with our bodies. Okay.
Wow. Well, we're coming to the end. So, Anna, do you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners today?
No, I like how we were saying now about self-care. That I think we need, because usually we don't even notice that we are not connected. We just go and we just, do things because there's a deadline or we need to do this, or we drink 2 Red Bull instead of sleeping 8 hours because we need to do it. And then we do it the third day. Like, it's people just go in these patterns and we don't really listen to our inner rhythm. And if we don't feel our inner rhythm and we don't feel what's actually a yes in my body, then it's also really hard to know when it's no. And to not be able to know when it's actually no, when it's actually yes, creates so much problems everywhere long-termly for us, if it's relationships or work or personal or private life. So I think self-care, and just, ask yourself, do you even say no when it's no? Or do you say maybe? Or, okay, yes, I can do it. Or like, how are you with no? So yeah, I think that's maybe a good last word. Say no.
Say no more. Say no today.
Yes.
Campaign slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we had those days with the kids once. We were practicing because I was interested how it works. And I said, okay, so today I really want you to say no when it's no. They said no to everything. Nothing was like what I wanted to do. It was a hard lesson.
Oh, man. Well, I really am so appreciative of this conversation. I feel very secure for the both of you. And Anna, we appreciate you so much, and just truly immensely for you joining us today, and just sharing so much of yourself and your work and your perspective on this topic. And so want to make sure to also ask you, is there anything you would like to promote, and where can listeners find you?
That's easy, because they can find me with Rafaela.
Yes.
It's the easiest answer. Yeah, I think that's actually the easiest answer. So you can find me at Healing Exchange.
Yeah, you can. And, I also just want to say that Anna has a program that she has developed, very beautiful program for adult adoptees wanting to work on their intimacy. And so if that sounds like something interesting to you, please check the show notes for the link to learn more and to schedule a discovery call to see if it's a good fit with Anna.
Awesome.
You're better than this than I am. That's exactly how you should do it, actually. I'm glad we figured that out. Where my comfort zone is and where it's not.
I've been doing this for a while. I got you, Anna. I got you.
Yeah, we want people to find you, Anna.
Yeah, Rafaela did know this already. And I think I knew it too, but now it's like, right. Awesome.
Oh, man. Well, alrighty, listeners. Please come back next week as we prepare to delve into forgiveness after trauma.
Yes, we are looking forward to a very soft conversation around forgiveness and trauma. And in the meantime, you can follow us at Soft Landing Podcast on Instagram, and head to healingexchange.com/podcast to get all of the goodies. And please rate and subscribe on Spotify, and also listen to us at YouTube Music if that feels good.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Anna, for being here.